Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and we have 50 questions to get through today. Yeah, I think we should get started. So, without further ado, here it is, the Rappter Q&A number 13. I hope you guys enjoy. Bcasted147 asks, what do you think about all the drama going on in the YouTube community? I typically try to stay away from that kind of stuff just because I like to watch YouTube to enjoy it, and I don't really want to surround myself with all the drama that goes on all the time. I'm still very much aware of it, of course, and if you want to know some basic thoughts, there are some parts of it that are really surprising, at least to me they are, and some parts that are a little weird, or just that I don't really fully understand because I don't know the full story. I'm being very vague about it, I know, but that's just because ultimately I don't have too much of a stance on it because that's not the kind of stuff I like to get too involved in. Would you rather have the PS5 or the Xbox Series X? I'm more familiar with PlayStation, but that's really only because the only non-Nintendo console I ever had was a PlayStation 3. Then again, PlayStation 5 does look a bit like a router, which is a little weird, but ultimately I'd probably still go for PlayStation just because of the familiarity. I feel like there are more games that are exclusive to PlayStation that would pique my interest more than the games exclusive to Xbox, so there's definitely that. If you can't tell already, I don't have a ton of information in terms of the real quality differences between the two. Maybe I'll just stick to my Switch and just play Smash Bros until the end of time. If you could go to any fictional universe, what would you do there and who would you like to meet? Because of my long and extensive history with superheroes, I feel like I'd almost be doing a disservice to myself if I had the option to go to either Marvel or DC and I just chose not to. I know those are dangerous worlds to visit, but that's just the kind of stuff that I love. And in terms of which one, I would probably go for DC just because I really want to meet the Teen Titans. One, because I'm a huge fan. Two, because I feel like, they're closer to my age, so I could probably relate to them more through conversation, get along with them more. But also, I just really want to know how they feel being kids superheroes, existing in this huge and powerful DC world, but still being kids, Because I've always imagined what it would be like if I had superpowers, and I'd actually like to talk to them and see what it really is like, and how they feel about it. Plus, I just really need to meet Beast Boy at some point in my life. Tristan Waits asks, who wins, Ben 10 versus Star Force Mega Man? I feel like the only real way that Star Force can win that fight is if Ben 10 turns into an alien that's not Alien X at the start of the fight, and then most likely Star Force would just be able to speed blitz him. If not, and Ben does actually turn into Alien X at the start, then I have to go with Ben 10 for the win on that one. Do you have any pets? Right now my family only has one dog. His name is Logan, and yes, we did name him after Wolverine. He is sleeping right now, so I was gonna go get him, but unfortunately I can't show him to you guys right now. But if you want to know just some things about him, he's a schnoodle, which is like a schnauzer poodle mix. He's about an average sized dog for that breed. He's got black hair, and he will not stop barking at literally anything and everything that moves. Are you excited for Venom, Let There Be Carnage? The first Venom movie didn't really sit right with me in a few ways, so I'm a little cautious about the sequel. It's a superhero movie, so of course I'm still gonna see it, and who knows, maybe they learn from their mistakes, and maybe it turns out to be really, really good. And plus, I just really need to see Carnage in a movie, and I think this might be the only chance we get in a really long time to see Carnage in a movie, so of course that plays into it as well. PokeFan0903 asks, best death battle of each season. In my personal opinion, going season by season, I would say Batman vs. Spider-Man, Wolverine vs. Raiden, Dante vs. Bayonetta, Naruto vs. Ichigo, Doctor Strange vs. Dr. Fate, Mega Man Battle Royale, and then Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi. But of course, with the rest of season 7 to come, that could obviously change. RedElastic98 asks, what are your thoughts on the horror genre? Are you a fan of it? I'm not a huge fan of the genre overall, definitely not to the same extent that I am with superheroes and Star Wars and other geek stuff. I can certainly enjoy and like certain aspects of certain horror things, like games and stories, but I'm definitely not as into it as a lot of the hardcore horror fans. Which do you like more, Marvel or DC? Ah yes, the age-old question. I love these universes pretty much equally. Again, these universes shaped my childhood, so this is basically like picking my favorite parent. But if I really had to go with one, I would go with Marvel, and it's not just because of the movies. I actually collected a lot more Marvel toys a lot earlier than I did DC, so I feel like I got more exposure to Marvel earlier on, especially with the more minor characters in Marvel, even before they made it to the MCU, so I know it's more than just the movies, even though the movies probably do play some part of it. But for a long time also, and a little bit still now, I thought the Marvel characters were more fresh and relatable, specifically the Marvel heroes, as opposed to the DC heroes who were literally modeled after Greek gods. And for a long time, I thought that Marvel just felt like a more superhero-y universe, because I thought that DC was too godly and perfect. But again, I love these universes so much, and I would say that I love them equally if I had the option to. What would win, an immovable object or an unstoppable force? This is basically the question of infinite strength versus infinite durability, and honestly, there really isn't an answer to this question just because the question doesn't really make sense, or the sentence doesn't make sense in its literal form. This actually reminds me of the omnipotence paradox, basically asking the question of, if an omnipotent being could create a rock that's too heavy for it to lift. I could actually talk about this for a long time, but just to keep it short and simple, some interpretations say that no, an omnipotent being can't do that, just because the sentence in and of itself is hogwash, and meaningless sentences don't suddenly acquire meaning just because we say that an omnipotent being can do it. Saying that an omnipotent being can create a circumstance in which it can't do something is in and of itself a paradox, and therefore just doesn't exist. So the answer is no. The same thing can be applied here. Saying that an unstoppable force, can't move something, or that an immovable object can't stop something is in and of itself a paradox, and is incapable of existing in the real world, even if we talk about omnipotence. So the answer to that question is honestly just no. As underwhelming as that may be. Jacob B asks, do you watch the Arrowverse shows? I only really watched a couple of those shows in the past, those being Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. I didn't really get too hooked on Arrow, and I never started into Supergirl at all. In fact, I actually stopped watching Legends after one season because I had too much to watch, and I just needed to let something go. When it comes to Flash, I haven't started season 6 yet, but I am hoping to soon. But that's really about it. I haven't watched Batwoman or any of the other CW shows. I am watching Titans, and I just started Doom Patrol, but those aren't in the Arrowverse, But yeah, that's what I'm watching right now. What battle royale would you like to see Death Battle do? Honestly, I'd really like to see them do the Fantastic Four battle royale. They're great characters, and their powers are so incredibly different, which is something that Death Battle hasn't really tackled before with their battle royales. If not that one, then I'd actually like to see them do a battle between different iterations of essentially the same character, whether it be through movie reboots or just different incarnations. It's a little weird, but it's something they haven't done before, at all. So I'd actually really like to see them do it. I think it'd be a cool experiment. How many subs do you think you'll have 1 year from now? This is hard for me to say just because I can't confidently say that our growth will continue after I get back to school, but if you really want to guess for me, I hope that we could hit 1,500 subscribers by the end of 2020, I hope, and then after that I'd probably give it another 200 to 300 by the time we reach this time in 2021. So yeah, around 1,700 or 1,800 would be my guess for around this time in 2021. Could be right, could be wrong, only time will tell. Thanos Quack asks, it looks like you're sitting on your bed when you film yourself. Is this true? I'm actually sitting in front of my bed right now. So my bed is right here, and I'm just sitting right in front of it. This is me sitting on my bed, and this is me in front of my bed. Maurice Reyes Munoz asks, are you aware of Death Battle debunk videos, and if so, have you ever agreed with them? I am absolutely aware of Death Battle debunk videos, and I have watched a good number of them just out of sheer curiosity. In terms of actually convincing me, some of them may have been able to convince me momentarily, or some of them might have at least gotten me to think about a certain thing a different way, but for me it always goes back to the fact that Death Battle does the most amount of work that they possibly can. They try to get the best answer that they possibly can, and just because a debunk video brings up something that Death Battle didn't bring up doesn't mean they didn't see it. They've said repeatedly that if they don't mention something, it doesn't mean they didn't see it, it just means that they've done the research and found that it didn't really matter. So sometimes it makes me think that debunk videos aren't really saying something that Death Battle didn't already find, so there's that always, that's in the back of my head. Plus I know, Death Battle does more research than just a standard debunk video. It's way easier to do something than to criticize something. Some debunk videos are pretty good, based on what they're trying to do, but for me it would be really tough for them to actually convince me 100% that Death Battle is wrong. Have you ever thought about interacting with other reaction channels who watch Death Battle's content like Duo Dreamer? No lie, I think that would be an amazing thing to do. Those guys seem like great people, and I think it would just be a great experience. The main problem though that I feel that I have with that is just that I don't think I'm really big enough in the Versus community to justify doing a collab with those guys. You have Death Battle who's in the center of the Versus community, and then you have those guys who are relatively big, all things considered. Then you have me who's in this really tiny corner over in the side that's doing my own thing, which is fine with me. I just kind of have to accept that I don't have the same impact as those guys. Those guys are really making themselves well known in the Versus community, whereas I'm just not, or at least not the same rate. So, again, it seems like a really awesome thing to do. If I could ever do it, I could just reach out to them at some point and just see. But as of right now, it just seems a little weird because I feel like I'm just not on the same level as those guys, at least in terms of impact. Pepsi Man versus Florida Man. Florida Man reminds me of a Toon Force character in the sense that I feel like he can basically do whatever as long as the audience finds it funny or ridiculous, but at the same time that doesn't really extend to combat too much. It usually just extends to self-harm or insane circumstances or something like that. So while I think that the Florida Man definitely has the potential to win that fight, I feel that Pepsi Man would probably neutralize Florida Man before Florida Man got the chance to do anything both crazy and effective in battle. Wow, I'm taking this way too seriously, holy crap. Blake Peters asks, if Death Battle did a fight between Dr. Doofenshmirtz and Mr. Crocker, how would you react? That's a fight I've never really considered before, but I think that would be really awesome and funny. I'd be intrigued to see what they would include for each character and how lenient they would be in the whole, you know, what may or may not be considered as prep time equipment kind of thing. But overall, yeah, I think it would be a really cool fight to see. What do you think is the most durable fictional material, including people like Superman? Imaginary Access actually did a really good video on this. I definitely recommend checking them out if you get the chance. And I totally agree that the most durable fictional material is Amazonium, which is what Wonder Woman's bracelets are made out of in the pre-52 universe. There are no examples of this substance breaking at all. Even when taking like the force of the entire Greek pantheon or literally godly attacks, there are just no examples of it breaking. It's not weak to anything like how Superman is weak to kryptonite, it's just completely indestructible. And I'm sure there are other metals in fiction where they're also just completely indestructible, but Amazonium is at least tied for that #1 spot, so there's that. And come to think of it, She-Ra actually did break those bracelets in the She-Ra vs. Wonder Woman Death Battle animation. So either she wasn't using Amazonium bracelets in that animation, or that just shouldn't have been able to happen. What do you think of the fight Finn the Human versus Link? I don't know that much about Finn, or even a whole lot about Link for that matter, but based on what I do know about those characters, yeah, I think that'd be a pretty interesting fight. The Bows asks, are you planning on making a prediction for who you think Beerus and or Krona's opponent will be? Definitely not for Krona, because I just don't really know Soul Eater at all. And when it comes to Beerus, I was thinking about that for a while, but I ultimately decided against it. One, because I feel like at this point I'm kind of late on that. There are already a ton of other videos that go over it perfectly, so I feel like I wouldn't really be adding anything new. And plus, I don't really know that much about a lot of Beerus's potential opponents, so I couldn't even really go over why I think they were a good match or anything like that. It would just be listing things that people have already listed before. As of filming this video right now, his opponent hasn't been released yet. I don't know if it's going to be released by the time I film this and by the time this actually becomes public on YouTube, so I don't know. But assuming that it's not, if you really want to know who I think Beerus could be fighting, I think the most likely options are Hades and Sailor Galaxia, but I could also see it being either Arceus or Phoenix. When is the Q&A? I know this question wasn't meant to be in the actual Q&A video. In fact, I technically answered it in the comments, but screw it, I'm putting it in anyway. The Q&A is right now. You're watching it right now. You found it. Good job. Toby Kylie, I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, asks, favorite Doki Doki Literature Club girl? Sayori. Don't at me. Super Mario Plushes asks, favorite Mario character? I really liked Bowser and Donkey Kong growing up playing various Mario games, although I also really like Mario and Yoshi as I've grown up more. If I really had to pick one character that I like the most, I would probably go with Bowser just for nostalgia. Do you like the Mega Man series? I haven't played much of it, but I am familiar with how some of the games work and some of the lore and everything like that, and it seems like a really cool franchise. I'm not very acquainted with it otherwise, but after learning more about Mega Man through Death Battle and other sources, I definitely have a new respect for him, so I got that going for me. Do you think the plush community is toxic? I'm not familiar enough with that community to form an opinion on it, but chances are if you're asking in the first place, it probably is to a certain degree. Ryder Tape asks, have you ever disagreed with a death battle that wasn't from season 1 or 2? I'm not sure that I would call these full-out disagreements, but I definitely have my issues with Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern and Cammy vs. Sonya. For me, it's just about misinterpretations of some facts in certain areas. Again, you know, I don't really want to say, oh, they're definitely wrong about it, but there are some things they decided to do and say that I just don't particularly agree with. Will you ever do reactions to other big versus shows? I personally only really like reacting to death battles just because I feel like they're top quality in basically every regard most of the time. Not saying that other versus shows are bad, I'm just saying that I don't think I'd enjoy them as much as Death Battle, and Death Battle just gives me everything that I'd expect out of that kind of show, so I don't really feel like I need to react to any other shows. If I was going to react to anything, it would probably just be under the Death Battle name, like stuff like DBX and Death Race. Are you hyped for Death Race? This question was asked before the first episode of Death Race came out. The first episode of Death Race is now out, and I have seen it. I actually reacted to it if you want to go check it out. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. It was better than I thought it was going to be. So yeah, I would say that I am pretty hyped for the rest of the show. I hope it keeps up this level of quality. Cinnamon Simon 66 asks, do you watch My Hero Academia, and what would you think of a My Hero Academia Marvel crossover? I've never watched My Hero Academia. I'm sorry, I've heard it's good. I've just never seen it. And I do think that a crossover between My Hero Academia and Marvel would be pretty interesting, especially My Hero Academia and X-Men. I think the whole thing with like the two superhero schools colliding would be a really interesting thing to see. Frankman asks, why is Black Canary vs. Sindel your least favorite episode of Season 7 of Death Battle? I mean, I did explain why it was my least favorite episode in the video where I said it was in length, so I'd go check that out if you're really interested. And just to keep this short, I just have some individual problems with how they portrayed the characters, and I just think it's a pretty forgettable episode in general. Do you agree that DC wins fair and square in Death Battle? I may have some DC fights here and there that are a bit iffy for me, but if you're really just asking whether or not I think that Death Battle is biased towards DC characters, I don't think they are. I think they just recognize that a lot of DC characters are really broken when compared to other worlds, and that's not really their fault, so no, I don't think they're biased towards DC. Who would win, Silver Samurai or Katana? I'd imagine that Katana is probably the slightly better fighter, but from my understanding, Silver Samurai is more powerful, tougher, and he just fights Wolverine all the time, which really puts it in his favor, I feel. So I feel like he would win, but that's just my opinion. Elijah Walker asks, if you were to go on a date with a Disney princess, who would it be and why? I would definitely have to go with Rapunzel from Tangled. Assuming that this is just a date and not like a full-time commitment, I feel like she'd just be the most fun and adventurous, and we just show each other a really fun time. I'm sure there are other princesses who are also really fun, but I feel like she's just the best in that regard, so I'd have to go with her. If you were a Naruto character that developed his own jutsu, what would it be called and how would it work? My jutsu would be known as Psionic Strain, or Psioniku Hizumi in Japanese. Basically what this does is it puts a psionic strain on an opponent's major organs, such as their heart and their brain, so this is basically guaranteed to have their stamina deteriorate much quicker than my own, so it basically means that I can last longer in a fight. This doesn't empower me, but it more so weakens my opponent, like from the inside, and therefore is harder to negate, which I think would be really powerful and also just kind of unique to the Naruto world. Maybe something like this already exists in the Naruto world, I'm just not familiar with all the jutsus, but either way, yeah, that's what I would choose. Who would win in a fight between Vlad Plasmius and King Boo? I'm not too familiar with either of these characters, but I'd have to imagine that King Boo is just portrayed to be a more powerful character overall, so I'd go with him right now, but like I said, you know, someone who's more acquainted with these characters would probably give you a better answer. All One asks, who would win, Flash, Wally West, or Sonic? Wally West would absolutely win that fight. His superior speed, his speed siphoning, and his infinite mass punches would just be way too much for Sonic to handle, and even him transforming into Super Sonic wouldn't guarantee a win, considering that the speed gap is still so much further in Flash's favor, and that's even assuming that Sonic could survive that long to transform into Super Sonic. Cody Lane the Dragon asks, what are your favorite elemental powers? Having fire manipulation has always been my go-to elemental power, but honestly I think that all of them are really cool, and I'd be more than grateful to possess any of them. What do you think of the fight Human Torch versus Firestorm? That sounds like a really cool fight on paper, but unfortunately it's not the closest fight in the world. Human Torch can burn and melt things, and he can destroy a small moon with his strongest attack, whereas Firestorm can alter matter at a molecular level and destroy the universe if he's not careful. So yeah, Firestorm definitely wins that fight. How would you feel if there was a movie about an alien invasion starring Ludacris made by me? That would certainly be a sight to see. Good luck, I hope it works out. Simon O'Brien asks, who would win between Mr. Bean and Mr. Magoo? Mr. Magoo wins by accident. Everything just seems to work out for him, even if he messes up over and over again, whereas Mr. Bean just messes up over and over again and doesn't do anything impressive, so yeah, I'd have to go with Mr. Magoo on that one, definitely. What is the scariest video game you've ever played? I don't really play any scary video games. They're not really my thing, just like how horror isn't really my thing. And normally I would try to give some sort of substitution or some sort of answer, but I can't really think of any video game that I've played that even remotely comes close to fitting that bill. So I can't really say that I've played a scariest video game. Although I have watched a lot of scary Let's Plays on YouTube, so, you know, I still have that exposure. After learning about Esdeath in Grey vs. Esdeath, what are your thoughts on her? I haven't rewatched that episode in a very long time, so I don't remember too much about her, but I do remember really liking her. For me, the sadism thing really works out well as long as it's done well, like with Carnage, and she just seems to have a really interesting backstory and, you know, really awesome powers. powers. So yeah, I just think she's a really cool character even if I don't remember too much about her from the episode. Son of a Pirate asks, have you ever had a near-death experience? I can't say that I've had a full-on near-death experience. There are certainly instances where things could have gone horribly wrong. For example, there was one time where I started crossing the street way too late while a car was headed in my direction. But I can't really say that there have been any times where I've been on death's door or anything like that. I'm sure it could happen sometime in the future, it just hasn't happened to me yet. Dinah Lance asks, who do you think would win between Black Canary and Elektra? For me, the Canary Cry really puts it in Black Canary's favor, and I feel like she's probably also a slightly better fighter just thanks to her pressure point knowledge. So I'd have to go with Black Canary more times than not. How would you rate Black Canary's agility from 1 to 10? This question really just depends on what metric you're using. Like, are you including superhuman characters with superhuman agility, or are you just looking at like the peak physical condition characters? Because if you're looking at like all the characters ever, I'd probably pin her at around 5 or 6, since she's still practically average in comparison to the rest of the superhuman characters. But if we're talking like peak physical condition characters, I'd rate it around an 8 or 9, because she's still really good, just not the best of the best. Do you think that Black Canary's mother, aka Dinah Drake Lance, could beat Black Widow? This fully depends on what version of Black Canary's mom you're using, because there are multiple versions of her. If you're talking about a version where she does indeed have the Canary Cry, like she's a metahuman, then I feel like she would beat Black Widow. But if not, and she's just like a good fighter, which is the version that I'm more so familiar with, then I feel that Black Widow would win that fight, because I feel like she has better physical feats, and she just has more deadly weaponry. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Lucas Green asks, what do you think the Joker's true origin story is? I don't like fully buying into one origin story, because I really like the mystery behind it all, but if I had to go with one, I would just go with the one where he was Red Hood, you know, more or less just a normal criminal. He fell into the acid, his mind was changed, and he became like the parallel or opposite of Batman. I don't really like the one where they imply that he actually had a family beforehand that was taken from him, because that's never been established to be part of his motivation, of course, you know, and so they're not really necessary, you know? It feels like a desperate attempt to make him mirror Batman more, you know, because Batman lost family and then Joker lost family, but it just sounds more like a desperate attempt to make them mirror each other more. Because for me, it's always been about the Joker himself. It's about him losing himself, not losing other people. That's the whole point of the Joker. It's all about himself, and his motivation is always just tied to Batman. So yeah, I don't really like that version of the origin story. If I had to go with one, I would just go with the standard Red Hood one. How many times do you think a character should be brought back to life after they're believed dead? I have a personal problem with fake out deaths in general, so I don't really like it when it happens at all, but if they're gonna do it at any time, you can't really do it more than once with the same character. At that point, it desensitizes the audience from the feeling of death, you know, of losing a character, so you definitely can't do that. And like I said, I just don't like them doing that in general anyway. I feel like, you know, they could get more creative. They could actually kill off big characters permanently if it makes sense to do so in the narrative, or at least for longer periods of time. Or, you know, there are more ways to create tension, to create stakes, and to have people lose things than just having a character die. So I think that stories need to be more creative with that, and, you know, not just keep killing characters and bringing them back to life. Which superhero do you think has the most potential to take over the world if they wanted to? There are so many heroes who could take over the world if they wanted to that it's not even funny. So there are multiple answers to this question, but I gotta go with Superman if we're just going with one character. You know, we've seen him do it before, and of course it hasn't lasted very long because of the other heroes, but I still feel like he'd be the most competent at doing it. I feel like with other heroes they'd be more likely to screw up quicker, whereas with Superman with his super intelligence, I feel like he'd actually know what he was doing. And like, let's be real, in a realistic scenario, if Superman wanted to take over the world, there is no hero on the planet or within that jurisdiction that could possibly stop him. If he was going all out, he could take over the world no problem. So there are multiple characters who could do it, but I really feel that Superman is the character that has the most potential to do it. And that brings us to the end of the Q&A. Guys, that took a long time, but I really hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please give this video a huge like. I always appreciate the likes. You can leave in the comments down below if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that, because I'll be sure to answer them in the comments. If you could subscribe to this channel, that'd be so great. That would really help my channel out. Thank you all so much for watching these videos. I really hope you enjoyed them, and it means so much to me. Thank you all so much for your questions as well. That means a lot. And yep, that's it for me. I will see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.